Hello and welcome to part 1 of 2 of a new video from Hurdu Cynics. My name is Victor, and in this video series I'm going to show you how I built the Forbidden Forest. Without further ado, let's get started. Every single piece of terrain that I build starts with a design. In this case I know the base will be 12 by 16 and I know I want 4 areas in this. I want a no man's land, I want some cliffs, I want a forest, and I really like the idea of those stone towers, so I'm gonna try to build one of those. Other than that, you're gonna see later on in the video that while the layout stays the same, the dimensions change a bit, but stay tuned and you're gonna learn more why. I want the base to be 12 by 16 inches, but my foam cutter can only cut something like 14 or so, and that means I have to actually make the base out of 2 pieces. So for the base I'm going to cut a 12 by 12 piece, and then I'm going to attach a 4 by 12 to make up the difference. For the heel itself I'm going to use 4 pieces of 11 by 12. And you're gonna see later on in the video that 4 pieces is too much, so I'm deciding to only use 3, and I'm going to shave off one of them. And you're also gonna notice that I'm making a big mistake here. I should have cut the pieces to whatever size I need before gluing them, but hey, I'm not gonna spoil my mistakes. Just stay tuned and you're gonna see what happens. Here I'm attaching the stack of 11 by 12 to the 12 by 12 piece. This will be the cliff, and that will be the big piece will be part of the base. By the way, I love my foam cutter. It has such a large cutting surface and it's better than probably some other big brand names. If you're interested in getting one for yourself, I'm going to post a link to it in the description of this video. Alright, so here's the big mistake that I've made. I've glued the pieces before cutting them, and the foam cutter cannot cut through glue, at least not through Gorilla Glue that I'm using. That means that I've been cutting and the hot wire was jumping all over the place. I was hoping to end up with very straight edges, but that didn't happen. It's not the end of the world, but hey, you know, mistakes happen. We're just gonna live with them. Now for attaching the remaining piece, toothpicks are not necessary, but I found it to be really helpful and they provide a bit of strength. So I don't know, it's the first time I'm trying this. It worked pretty well. I might do it in the future. I'm telling you, foam cutting is the most satisfying thing I've ever done. No, well, never mind, sorry kids. But while I was cutting foam, I realized that the slope of the hill is too much and I don't like it, so I should have only done 3 pieces of foam, and probably the best thing I can do at this point is just try to shave off one of the sheets. It's not gonna be easy, and it's not gonna be perfect, but hey, you know what, there's terrain and you know, nature is not perfect. Whatever comes off, and if there's imperfections, I'm gonna blame it on nature. I've tried to put a few 28mm minifigures on the slope and they were just falling off. So I think I'm going to have to reduce the angle, but for that to happen I have to actually make the slope longer. And yeah, that's what I'm going to try here. Hopefully it's not gonna go into the tower area. I'm measuring everything and cutting carefully. Well, spoiler, it worked out pretty fine, but yeah, it's no longer aligned with the original design that I've had, so yeah, it is what it is. Now that I know that 4 layers of foam is too much, I'm going to only use 3 of them for the tower. And you might think that I've learned from my mistakes to not glue foam before cutting it, but guess what? I've done it again. I've glued the foam before cutting it, and you will notice that the hot wire just jumps around when I try to cut the tower to a round shape. It's not the end of the world. I can work with that, and I'm going to throw some rocks on top of it, so I think at the end you're not even going to be able to notice the difference between a perfectly cut circle and what I have here. Alright, big milestone achieved here. We are down with the shape of the base. Now it's time to build some landscape on it. The first step is use some plaster cloth to build a foundation for everything that we're going to put on top. This will hide any imperfections from the cutting process and will also allow us to, smoothen up some of the surfaces. I'm using this plaster cloth that I found on Amazon. Whatever you can find just works. Some people might prefer Mod Podge, that also works, but I found plaster cloth to work pretty well as a base layer, and only where I have really sharp angles, that's where I do some Mod Podges. You're gonna see a bit later. I don't know about you, but I found that Mod Podge is kind of great, but it's kind of ridiculously expensive, so I'm using it in only certain areas of my models, and it's great for smoothing surfaces, so I'm doing it here to have a nice transition between horizontal and vertical planes. These are some rock molds that I've built before. I found the best way to cut them is to score them. You make the vertical line through the rock, and then eventually you break it. It's just gonna follow whatever the path of least resistance is, and if you make little score marks on it, that will be the path of least resistance, which works great. What I'm trying to do here is just to get the layout of the cliff and the major details. You're gonna see later on how we're gonna fill all the gaps and make sure the cliff looks uniform and there are no distinct areas that you can tell were individual rock pieces. Once the big rocks are in place, I'm going to use some small rocks to fill the gaps. This will not fill the smallest gaps, but this will fill the medium-sized gaps. Again, I'm using rock molds. I prefer the Woodland Cynics ones, and I'm going to post some links in the description if you really want to support this channel. But whatever way you have to build rocks works. Just make sure you sprinkle them around, and then in the next step you're going to see how to fill all the gaps. For wrapping the tower with rocks, I first tried a technique that almost is like wrapping the rock around. It worked pretty okay. But you can see it kind of crumbles, and I know it's not perfect, but it can also work. However, I found that after doing half the tower, cutting vertical strips from the rock might be a better approach for the future. I didn't go back to change what I've done, but definitely in the future I will try that. Scoring the rock on the back and then breaking those pieces allows us to get a much more smoother surface. It doesn't matter that much now because we're gonna fill those gaps anyway, but I think it would have been easier overall to attach the entire exterior of the tower. Here I'm using a Dremel rotary tool to cut those sticking edges. Just make sure you do it outside, and you can see here I'm also using a vacuum cleaner because this thing generates a lot of dust. Also, wearing a mask probably is a good idea, even though I haven't done it. To fill the gaps in the rocks, I'm using a mixture of plaster, water, and vinegar. Vinegar allows the mixture to stay dry for longer, allowing me to model it however I want and fill all those gaps. It's just a lengthy process, but I'm not gonna bore you with the whole thing. You can see here I'm just pouring the mixture in and kind of filling all the cracks.